Finance and Administration Committee meeting for November 7th. We're a little bit delayed. It's 10:07. I'll start the agenda off with public comments. Please step forward. Your public comment can be 3 minutes long and address the chair and give your name and location where you vote from. Going once, twice, 3 times. All right. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Support.
Go to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Same sign for nay or no. All right, the agenda is approved. Moving on to consent resolutions. Oh, wait a minute.
The first item on.
Didn't know I even had that on. I apologize. I think I did that on purpose. Anyway, moving on to the consent resolutions. The first item is the approval of the minutes from October 5, 2023, Finance and Administration Committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved. I'd like to move that pull consent for action items.
Okay, and so we'll put that, the motion is then to move it to
Number 19.
19.
Second.
Second.
No motion needed.
No motion needed. So we'll just go ahead and move that, the approval of the minutes to action item 19. All right, moving on to the agenda and action items request. The number 1 item is statement of a review. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve a statement of review. Support.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Action item number 2 is accounts payable for September 25, 2023 through October 27, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve general claims in the amount of $81,919,990.26 as presented by the summary report for September 25th through October 27, 2023?
So moved.
Second.
Is there discussion?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Karen, just a quick question, if you could. There's a couple invoices for corporate counsel in there. Are we going to make I know we did a budget adjustment for 110,000. Is that still going to work out, or do we have to do something with that?
Right, so these were processed.
Right.
And so that tells me, I think we went over a little bit in that particular purchase order. There were other savings in the department.
Okay.
So additional funds were reallocated.
Okay. Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Is there further discussion? Any other questions of Karen? All right, seeing none, we need to go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mrs. Miedema,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to action item number 3, implementation of cost of services for family planning program. The suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the implementation of select fees on December 1st, 2023 for family planning services. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Support.
And is there discussion? All right. Seeing none, can we go to a roll call vote?
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mrs. Miedema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Moving on to action item number 4, Lakeshore Regional Entity Grant. Suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a contract with Lakeshore Regional Entity. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And is there discussion? Is there somebody that could, I just want to ask a question about Lakeshore Regional Entity. Hi there. And I apologize, I don't remember your name.
No, it's okay. Good morning. My name's Amy Shealy.
And the only question I had is that I associate Lakeshore Regional entity with CMH. And so it's interesting to me that we have a relationship or sort of, I mean, with the health department. Could you explain a little bit further, like why that is?
Sure.
And these are like substance use and gambling.
Yeah, that's a great question.
grants?
So we don't get any gambling funding from the LRE. Ours specifically is for substance use disorder prevention services. So
Okay.
our focus is really on the prevention side of things. And we do work closely with CMH in partnership with a lot of the different task force and initiatives, but we specifically through the health department have some initiatives that are separate from CMH. So some examples of that would be, we teach a Prime for Life class, which is an evidence-based program in partnership with the schools and juvenile courts. And so for kids who have already been caught using a substance, alcohol or drugs, they attend this class as part of their suspension program. So for example, we offer that twice a month.
Okay, thank you very much. So primarily prevention.
Prevention, yep,
Prevention
exactly.
Related.
Mhm.
Okay. Karen, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to mention, so the PA $2 that the LRE grants out, so those are state convention tax dollars. Those are distributed to the county. 50% of that funding we receive is restricted for substance use disorder. The county, the LRE has been named the county's official designee to distribute those funds. So when those dollars come in, we immediately send 50% of them to the LRE. They distribute them both to CMH, public health, and others in county to manage substance abuse disorders.
So the grant specifies that it has to be distributed in that manner.
There's actually Public Act 2, yes.
Okay.
Public Act, they call it Public
Public
Act
Act 2.
$2. It's the state convention and facilities tax.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Mrs. Ebel. Yes. Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran. Yes. Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to action item number 5, the Children's Special Health Care Services Contract. The suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a contract with Southeastern Michigan Health Association. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Right, is there discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to a vote.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran. Yes. Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to action item number 6, grant for type 2 water supplies. Suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a contract with Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, otherwise known as EGLE, to help ensure protection and safety of type 2 wells.
So
Do I have a
moved.
motion? Thank you. Support.
Support.
And do we have discussion? Questions? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to action item number 7, City of Holland Agreement to Accept Eagle Grant Funds. The motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a contract with the City of Holland. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have any discussion? Looks like Kim might come up and discuss. Please come forward. Yeah,
Hi, I was asked to give a little presentation on it.
perfect.
If you don't want it, I won't have to give it, but
Oh,
it's kind of
no.
refresh everything. kind of.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Kim.
And I do have with me, in case there's questions about the proposal in the future, Dan Boersma. He is the sustainability manager for the city of Holland. I'll wait till the presentations are ready. And anytime you guys have questions, feel free to interrupt and ask away,
All right, thank you, Kim.
hopefully. If you want to go ahead and start with the second slide. All right. So just to refresh everyone's memory, this grant that was already approved by the board was to approve $1 million, to receive $1 million from Eagle in regards to an infrastructure grant. The intention was to hopefully build a site in Allendale to get to that population as well. It was applied for in fiscal year 22 and it was awarded in 23. We approved and it was fully executed in 7/6 of 23. How this grant kind of works is an 80-20 match. So 80% of it's covered by Eagle and 20% is matched by the grant acceptor. The concerns that was stated in the project when we did it was initially of what are the ongoing costs, how are we going to fund that, and then the required match. So, and then when we left with this, it was all right, we've received the grant, so we can have time to kind of adjust how we want to go with this, and then to come back to you, which is why I'm here now, with a direction of what we see and what we want. So then on the next slide, which is the new direction. So what I did is I looked at our funding. And because we're still in negotiations with our contracts, which is what funds my program, it was 100% funded through the tipping fees of the landfill. And we're negotiating that. So looking at that, thinking, okay, is taking on additional operational cost a smart decision for the county and for these funds at this time? And it was evaluated that it's probably not. So what we decided to do then is look at what can we do to still keep this $1 million possibly within the county so that we can still, meet the grant requirements and meet the residential needs that we have in this area. So what we've chose to do is partner with the City of Holland. City of Holland has an opportunity to build a new drop-off center as well. So what are the odds? So we took advantage of this in hopes that we can then essentially be a pass-through so we can get these grants over. It'll still allow for the expansion of services since they will have additional services that we might be able to utilize for our residents. It'll also actually relieve some of my service pressures that I have at our Holland site on Quincy. That's my busiest site. We're always getting complaints of your hours aren't long enough. We need to have more hours because I have only 1 or 2 people out there that can't service these long lines that we're starting to get. So instead of actually, it would help us of increasing the cost to be able to have to open up another hour, more labor. This might relieve some of that. The hopes are actually. So, and with this partnership, we get more options, more discussion, and more availability of possible partnerships with electronic waste, cardboard, other things that might reduce some of those pressures that we see at our sites. So the City of Holland partnership, we'd both benefit because we'd have, there you go, increased collaboration. Ottawa County will have the understanding that from the resources from the City of Holland, as well as any resources and information that I may have to help them do better. We can start sharing that even better because we'll actually have this new center. As discussed in the previous meeting, Part 115's update for materials management, this would also help with that because it would be another drop-off center in Ottawa County. It would help collect those materials, increasing Ottawa County's goals. And it'll also provide various services to both Ottawa and City of Holland residents. Again, the City of Holland then benefits in the fact that they now have $1 million towards this project of theirs. And then again, like I talked about, always that increase in collaboration. Ottawa County benefits in the fact that we have a possible location to discuss educational efforts so that everyone can see that full circle. Because that was one of the things at my sites. I don't have a covered area to really talk about all the items. They're always outside, they're smaller. This would be a different kind of location where possibly we can utilize that. We can also increase some of Ottawa County's requested materials such as styrofoam. That's a big one that we can't. That's something that the City of Holland's hoping to do at their new center. Leave. And then, like I said before, it'll help give me some pressure on my city of my Holland Center, as well as the growth in services provided. They might choose to do something that I'm unable to do that'll still help us reach our overall goals because they'll have a new center. All right. And then if you look at the logistics part of it, which a lot of people are, center's next. All right, I talk about the center. I am not the center expert. Dan is, but essentially that's what his proposed center design is. At this moment, I believe they're still, tweaking because it's the start of a project. But those are the idea of what they'll be accepting. Some of those services are new to them because they do curbside.
Mhm.
These are additional items that they could take in or ones they're hoping to. I'll let you guys ask questions now, or I can do it later on the actual center part of it. That's up to you. But that's ideally, in a nutshell, the center.
Does anybody have any questions? Kim? Allison?
Yeah.
Morning
Commissioner
again.
Wiedemann.
Yeah.
How I read it is that it will be available to all residents of Ottawa County. Is that correct?
Yep. So this agreement that we're presenting to you today to present to the City of Holland.
Right.
Is the first step. So that's essentially the grant-based one. The second one that'll come down once things are more chugging down the line will be one of how that partnership's going to look. Will we have a whole membership wide, so if you're an Ottawa County member, you can also go to theirs, or we work in the partnership of I collect materials at my site and I then bring them or funnel them towards, or do we? So a lot of the things in these materials is the more you have of it, the cheaper the cost is. So do we have possible partnerships along the line where they're included in, let's say, our electronics? Now we have, or we bring our electronics for them because they're doing a different type of process versus, all those partnership will be locked in a different agreement down the line.
Are you thinking that it would possibly be like a regional aspect to it, dividing the county
Yeah.
into kind of sections?
So the state's favorite word is a hub and spoke system. So that's their item. And so essentially this would be more of a hub too, or it could be a hub, it could be a spoke, in some services I see it's more of a hub. So like possibly they might do, let's say, some like mattresses. That's a good example. That's always something someone wants. But you might need a whole truckload of mattresses to make it worth the vendor to come out. So I could collect a certain amount perhaps at my sites and funnel them there so that we have enough, or create this truckload route. There's those kind of things too. So that's kind of some of the future partnerships. Or styrofoam, you need to have enough to compress. So, collecting at the other sites can bring it there. So that's where my sites are the spokes and this site would be the hub.
I like that
So,
visual. Yeah.
yeah.
But it really does speak to a lot of collaboration and logistics too.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the whole concept of a lot of what the new law is talking about, collaborations. I know like Myers and Shape and a lot of these big businesses in Ottawa are also talking about this law and all these efforts of collaboration of how we can all come together to do this better.
It's wonderful. And Dan, where will the center be located? Do you have a site selected?
Yeah, as you can see, it's on 3rd and 4th, and Pine is where we're targeting right now. There still has to be some, we still have to work with the planning committee and everything, but right now that seems to be the best site. It's near downtown. It's near a big, a lot of our residents are close to there. So,
Commissioner Moss?
Yeah, follow-up question. Is there something on that site now, or is that already city-owned? It's city-owned. We use it as our forestry lot right now. So there's a lot, if you see, there are some big piles of chips and logs and things like from stored debris. Oh, great. I guess the other question I had was wondering if Administrator Gibbs had any thoughts.
on the plan or?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Amos. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. And I'll get Commissioner Bergman right after.
Sorry. Thank you. Just to reiterate something that Kim said earlier, we received this grant quite a while back, and we were really deliberating. Sometimes free money can be very expensive. And so we take this grant and we were going to be building our own new recycling center from scratch. We kind of determined that the cost would be a little bit prohibitive, if not upfront, then with ongoing. So when this partnership with Holland came up to kind of go together with them of what they were already doing, we thought it was a really good opportunity to have some synergy and cooperation there in a way that is a little bit more sustainable financially as well. So that's why I think this is kind of a good opportunity that's presented itself here. That's kind of some of the reasoning behind why we're doing this. Thank you.
Commissioner Bergman?
So we're talking the site of a former baseball park.
Yeah.
Correct.
The old softball field.
Yeah, the old softball field. So is that going to be screened somewhat from the Pine Avenue? It's a very busy street.
Yep.
Of course, across the street is going to be the Newver Planks spot. So it's a natural area to do it, but I'm wondering about the screening. Will it be a screened site as well?
We haven't designed that yet, but that's a part of the process that we've already started to discuss on
Okay.
whether it's screened, fenced, or do we use some sort of natural cover?
Sure.
We see this as a really good opportunity from a sustainable perspective to highlight, the collaboration and also to make it a full sustainability center. So it's, a screen that goes up, or, we're open at this point. We'd like to get together a design team for the entire site after this.
Sure.
To make sure we do it right.
Good, because just down the street is the Padna site, and that's a little unsightly at times, and so one more unsightly site would not be good on Pines.
Yeah, that's one of the other reasons why we chose this site is
Sure.
because it is
It gets-
bordered on two
Yeah,
sides by
yeah.
Padnas, and
And
they're the ones
the
that protect
planks.
the materials. So
Planks and brewers,
Mhm.
yeah, it's all there, so.
yeah, it's a whole like sustainability recycling corridor
Sure,
right there.
yeah, good.
Commissioner Belknap?
Just thank you for doing this. I'm looking at your list of things that are accepted, and a lot of those things are things that I can't get rid of in my household recycling. So I'm grateful for that. I imagine this will be a popular thing, and perhaps a demand for a site similar, in the northwest corner of the county might be something in the future. The shrink wrap, boat wrap thing is, grateful for that too, because obviously I could fill a landfill, lot, and I had one other thing and I'm trying to remember what it was. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, part of my hopes is that, maybe still in the future, like I said, we can still go the direction that we were hoping for with the Allendale area, the less service. But we'll be fortunate enough that City of Holland has gone through some of those pains and growing pains of, this is something newer. This is something the state's really hoping for, more of these drop-off centers, because like I said, the items in those curbside, you just can't put them in there. And so what do? You feel guilty putting it in there. So you have options. So like essentially we can learn from their experiences, like, all right, do you put up a screen or a fencing system, or is there a natural way to also, and essentially bring it to the top to the bottom? So how do we visually educate, prospectively, here's the materials we take in, but at the sense say, okay, we're also looking at items of like natural conserved, sustainability, instead of mowing all the time. Maybe the City of Holland will look into working with Outdoor Discovery or other local environmental groups that we know of that look at that natural growth, so we don't have to mow as often. So that's less gas use, that's less services needed, that's more natural sustainability. So all aspects of sustainability could possibly be shown there.
And one last thing, from a partnership perspective, Kim is on my task force for the City of Holland, and I'm on her materials management group. So we're constantly talking on a regular basis. So when we create the design team, I'm asking her to be on that team. So we actually, make sure we do it that's best for all the residents. So
I just a request that when this is almost ready for, operations, I don't know if we could use our newsletter as a way to convey to our residents opportunities that may not be available to them with their own household recycling program. That this would be available to them.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things that we would like to do is partner with, you, the state, anybody who wants to come and really make sure we get the word out. Because something like this, I think a lot of times is kind of brushed aside a little bit, where I think this could be something we can highlight. So.
Commissioner Miedema.
I appreciate your comment, Commissioner Beldamp. I think that would be a great idea for the PR with the county once it's to that point. And Kim, I just want to say thank you for your problem solving and your ability to pivot from one plan to this one. So just thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Like I said, the goal is to serve the community. So how best to do it. So.
Thank you for that, Kim. Truly.
I think there's a couple more slides. There's a couple more slides too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna,
Yeah.
I was just gonna to start a presentation, actually.
Yeah.
So,
So this is,
yeah.
that's the fun part is the design. What can it be? And for your guys' understanding, I want to talk about the logistics of it. So where does the county play in this still, and some of that is that, so what will happen is Eagle, so this, I'll go backwards. So City of Holland.
Motion to recess.
I'll be back in a
We're
bit.
gonna go ahead and recess. Till the fire alarms. Satisfied. I think it. Lots of excitement. Thank you for your flexibility. Oh, so we'll start back with the City of Holland agreement to accept Eagle Fund grant funds with Dan and Kim.
So we're talking about the logistics, the fun stuff. But so what that is, so essentially how it'll work with the grant, we've been working a lot with Eagle and talking with them about this option. And so what happened is the City of Holland would put in their request for funds. Then Eagle would accept it. And then we get paid the grant funds since we are considered the grant recipient. And then we pay out the City of Holland. So you'll see money coming in and the exact same money coming out. So that's how that's worked. So I believe we put in a budget adjustment for that too. So if you see that item like, oh, $1 million, and then it's coming in and it's going out, and that's what this is. It's part of this agreement. And then I provided the current timeline. I'm not going to go over it, but these are to meet the Eagle deadline. They talked to us and we had it extended because of some City Holland election type items, kind of change it up a little bit, and Eagle was willing to work with us. So now we have a due date of the 21st. So the idea is to get essentially through the county for you guys to approve this legal in agreement, any options or questions you had, get those kind of figured out in this meeting, at the board meeting, and then hopefully be able to then present the signed copy to the City of Holland. And I already kind of touched on that, you know, we hope to have future ones. So this won't be the last time to talk, you know, so we'll talking with them down the road, which obviously you'll be involved with as well, of like what kind of agreements, what the site's going to hold, how's our partnership going to look like, more nitty gritty stuff. On the next slide is just to make it nice, clear and cut. What are we requesting? We're requesting for the action to, you know, go in this direction. Since it wasn't the original purpose of the infrastructure grant that we would propose to you, make sure that you're okay with the idea of, you know, passing this grant on through to City of Holland, as well as to start that interlocal agreement. Interlocal, intergovernment, and MOU are all the same thing from what I understand. So if you see those terms, that's what they are. But yeah, essentially, and then they will construct within the constraints of the grant, the new drop-off center in the City of Holland.
Commissioner Moss.
Do we have estimates on cost, or are you going to try to fit the new facility into the cost that's available, or is the city bringing in additional funds? Just curious.
That's a lot of good questions.
Right.
And I think that's where the design team's going to have to come. This was just kind of we knew some folks to help do a CAD drawing so we can get a visual in front of you.
Yep.
But the materials task force is really going to have to come together and say, okay, this is what we're talking about.
Great.
And that's where, you know, that partnership that I have. So if you guys have like, hey, have you thought about this or something? I'm on the task force, and that's, you know, one of the reasons why I'm on it is to represent the county of like, hey, this is what the county kind of suggested, thoughts. This is not just my take, but anything that you guys present to me, I can also bring on.
Commissioner Belknap.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on Commissioner Bergman's comment about, you know, having a screening, and just thought it'd be appropriate to have the potential for recycled materials as part of the overall, you know, land use landscape, you know, fencing type thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Yeah.
can you rephrase the question? I'm a little confused.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
So just the need for screening, because it's going to be like kind of a, you know,
Well-
pit more or less with stuff coming. So if we have,
Yeah.
you know, screening, I think it would be kind of apropos if we used materials recycled to kind of
Absolutely,
help
like a
provide
recycled
that
material, yeah.
shroud.
Just a little bit of more knowledge on this is the idea for the center is to be more aggregate. So when cardboard's dropped off, it's not left outside. It's actually put into a bale within the facility already, or styrofoam would be put right into the condenser. So it would take very little for it to, you know, it's not going to blow away. It'll be processed almost immediately. So.
Fantastic.
I think to help you guys get a general idea of what this could, you know, just obviously this will be newer and better, but our Quincy site is actually in partnership with Holland Charter, and it's part of that Quincy Street Park. So it's, and then part of that, you know, is that you've got the natural screening. So it's kind of tricky when you're trying to tell someone, hey, this is where the site is. They always end up going to Quincy Park because it's been naturally screened. So the park the trees and forestries around it, as well as there's been that environmental kind of thought process. And there's nothing at our sites that are left open. You know, everything is kept clean and neat as possible. So, you know, if you want an idea of what the worst case scenario, which is not bad, I would recommend visiting the Quincy Street site or any of our sustainability sites. He's going to take it to the next level and have a permanent structure. But with the bins, how they look and the recycling, we have that type of items out there already.
Right. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Dan. Nice to meet you. Thank you, Kim.
I forgot to add, I worked with
Yeah.
Jack for some grammatical things
I
on
s-
it last, just before the meeting.
Okay.
So the content, everything is still the same in the interlocal agreement. There's just like grammatical little changes.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. All right. So we're gonna go to vote for the City of Holland agreement to accept the Eagle Grant funds and to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the contract with the City of Holland.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is action item 8. It's the Emergency Solutions Grant with MSDHA. Suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the grant agreement between the Michigan State Housing Development Authority and Ottawa County on behalf of Ottawa County Community Action Agency to provide services to prevent homelessness. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support
Support.
and discussion? I don't know. Jennifer, if you want to come, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So just a little bit of background on this grant. I know we brought one to you back in, I think, an amendment in last winter. So essentially this grant, we act as the fiduciary. So we don't provide the direct services at CAA. We're the fiduciary for the 2 sub-grantees. And those sub-grantees, actually, it's action item number 9 as well. Good Samaritan is one of the sub-grantees, and then the other is Community Action House. They're not on the agenda today because their contract is under 70,000. So those 2 agencies provide the homelessness services. And then as the fiduciary, what we do at CAA, it's specifically myself and fiscal. We review all of their invoicing, make sure that they get paid. We submit everything into MSHDA's electronic portal. We prepare the application and just make sure that everything is into the state on time. So that's, high level what that grant looks like.
Any questions? All right. Seeing none, do we have any questions? Are you going to be our resource for Good Samaritan as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we have action item number 9. Any questions? That way I can let you just go sit down.
Great.
Too.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Jennifer. We can go to a vote, Rachel.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to action item number 9, contract for the Emergency Solutions Grant. Suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the contract with Good Samaritan Ministries for the Emergency Solutions Grant. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Is there any discussion? Commissioner Medema?
Just wanted to share with the board that I reached out to Chester Township and spoke with I spoke with the clerk and then one of the trustees, and their full board is in support of this. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you. All right.
Oh, am I in the wrong one?
I think you're on the wrong one. I think you're on the next one.
All right, well,
Yeah.
keep it in mind for number 10.
For number 10, there we go. All right.
Just ahead of the game.
Yeah, that's right. You are in a cheat. high achiever.
That's right.
Okay.
We turn the clock back.
Yeah, I
Commissioner
already
Moss?
crossed off this one and.
Yeah.
Was anyone from Good Samaritan?
Actually, I
Ministries
just
here,
had-
or-
Oh, I
Just
just asked
wondering.
Jennifer, she was representing.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
all right. So we'll go ahead and go to a vote.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to action item 10, demolition services contract. Suggested motion is to forward to the Board of Commissioners and recommend the board chair and clerk sign a demolition services contract in support of the amount of $103,845 with specialized demolition. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Okay. In discussion?
I'll repeat my comment that
Absolutely. Commissioner Medema.
Chester has fully supported this.
All right.
And that might be an understatement. Chester's really excited about this. So I expect you'll want me just to give a
Absolutely.
summary.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
So brief summary of the item you have before you. It's a case study for collaboration and perseverance. We're very, very, very happy to have this agreement before you today. What it is represents a portion of the funding that the Ottawa County Land Bank Authority received from the State Land Bank Authority for demolition projects across the county. So the Ottawa County Land Bank administers this, governs the projects. This is one of those projects. We brought it before you. We're kind of overshooting from an approval standpoint. The contract you see is for $103,000 or so. The part that the Ottawa County is responsible for is $62,000. The landowner is bringing some money to the table, which is why you have a unique agreement in your packet. Corporation Counsel really did us a solid and hustled to put this together. This isn't something that we ordinarily do with our contracts. We were very appreciative to have that cooperation to get that done. So the project itself, who is familiar with the old Dykstra's elevator in downtown Conklin, if I can use downtown as a term? A couple of you. Some of you have not been by there. Back in the day, back when I used to, sell animal feed and got up there a lot, it was a robust, very effective part of the community. Today, not so much. They have not sold feed through that outlet in many years. There's a private entity that now owns it. They have numerous properties in other communities. They're very busy, have redevelopment plans for it and fully intend to demolish it, but it hadn't really been high on their priority list. This demolition funding that we were able to receive from the State Land Bank allows us to catalyze that a little bit. Having a little extra money to go towards the project does help catalyze those things. Chester Township folks that drive by it all the time, which the property owner is not. They're from Marne. They do construction. They're on the road a lot. They don't see this property every single day. Folks that live in the community see this property every single day. So catalyzing the demolition of this project and moving it forward towards redevelopment is really high on their priority lists. So when the Ottawa County Land Bank Authority had the opportunity to offer this funding to communities, a lot of the projects had to be very turnkey because there's a lot of guardrails on this funding. So this is one of those turnkey projects that we were able to submit and get approved. So all that to say, we're really proud of putting this project together. Everything has to be wrapped up by 12/31/23. So we're going to get our hustle on now. If you choose to approve the contract before you and put it through to the full board, happy to entertain any questions. I'm sure I've missed some key pieces of information in my quick summary, and Joe,
Okay.
John, and Jack are all very, very well versed on it. And the Land Bank Authority chair is here with us today too, Amanda.
Wonderful. Commissioner Moss?
Yep, I just thought it might be interesting for the other board members to hear just a little bit about the land bank, as kind of a specific use, kind of limited in some ways, but specialized.
Yep. Yeah. Let me cover the Blight elimination grant funding a little bit overarching for
be
the
great.
board for sure. So there has been a few tranches of money coming through. I think the total bucket was like 21 billion with a B or million. I actually don't remember. There's a lot of money coming from the State Land Bank Authority coming through to land bank authorities all around the state. And if you don't have a land bank authority, local units can access this funding specific for blight elimination. You can only use the funding on blighted properties. That's probably the only thing that's common across every single property. There's certain uses, certain ownership limitations. 2 rounds have been awarded already. Those are with state funding, and it's a much broader use of funds. So we are able to use those first two rounds of funding in much broader ways. We were able to fund this project in Chester, a project in Grand Haven, which sadly might not come to fruition because of things outside of our control, a project in Zealand that's going along quite nicely, and a project in Hudsonville that's also going along quite nicely and also happens to be a grain elevator or a co-op, not a grain elevator truly, but a co-op. So we were able to fund those all in the first two tranches of funding. There's two more coming, rounds 3 and 4. We lovingly know them as. And we call this unicorn hunting is what we call this, trying to find projects that we can apply those funds to, because our blight situation here in Ottawa County is much different. Our demographics are much different than a lot of other community land banks. So it makes this more difficult to find projects that meet all the many, many requirements of the round 3 and 4 funding, but we are working on that. We do have until March with some of the funding to identify projects. So we're doing some outreach, holding some discussion sessions to find projects for that. So that's all blight elimination program funds that come from the state through the state land bank out to land bank authorities and or local units to help support blight elimination and other types of rehab, stabilization, environmental contamination remediation projects.
The beautification of the state of Michigan.
We're trying, at least making it less ugly so it can be beautified later. These funds are about making it less ugly.
Wonderful. We have any further discussion? Seeing none. All right, we'll go to a vote for the demolition services contract.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra.
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Right, moving on to action item 11, fiscal year 2024 agreement for MSU Extension Services. Suggested motion is to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk and register to sign the FY 2024 agreement for extension services between Ottawa County and MSU Extension at the cost of $272,572. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Right, is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, I'm going to keep us on schedule here. I'll go ahead and go to a vote.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to action item 12, Grand Haven Charter Township Water Transmission System 2023. Suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the resolution approving the Grand Haven Charter Township Water Transmission System 2023 improvements bond.
So move. Support.
Is there discussion? Patrick, would you like to come speak? Yes, please.
Morning.
Good morning.
I'm Pat Staskevich, the Public Utilities Director for the Ottawa County Road Commission. I'm here today representing Grand Haven Charter Township. Grand Haven Township is looking to make some improvements to their water system. They're going to be constructing a 20-inch water transmission main about 5,000 feet, plus a water metering station along the Ferry 172nd Avenue corridor from Grant Street south to across from the D&W store. So the project is about 6.3 million, and they're asking for 3.5 million in a bond issue, and the remainder is going to come from ARPA funds and their fund balance. So in front of you, the township has already passed a resolution supporting the project. The road commission has passed that resolution. We're required to put a notice in the paper for a 45-day referendum period. We have done that, and that's set to expire on November 12th. And so we have scheduled the next time in front of the board, the county board would be the 14th at the expiration of that referendum period. So I'm looking for your support on this detailed resolution. I am prepared to walk you through any of this if you so desire. I could give you the cliff notes of these 24 items, or I could answer specific questions if that is better.
Exactly. Commissioner Belknap.
maybe go through first and then, because you'll probably answer some of the questions I have if you kind of
Sure.
give an overview.
Sure, I'm just going to go quickly through the resolution. So there's a definition section and then it describes the project. It's 6,319,900 is the estimate. And it'll be more than 20 years of useful life. I do have plans and specifications that are in the process and I can have those available on the 14th. The bond contract is the main item that you're approving. The road commission and the township are the ones that enter into that contract, but you're also authorizing that contract. In item 4, you're authorizing the sale of $3.5 million bond issue. And then there's some bond details in the next section. These are serial or term bonds in $5,000 increments, not to exceed 7%. We expect the interest rate is going to be more like 4.2 is what we're hoping in that range. There is some ability for prior redemption. Typically, those are detailed in the sales order. And we have at least 10 years before we can call a bond. But in the 11th year, if conditions change and the township have excess funds, they could call that bond issue. We agree, of course, to pay the principal and interest on the bonds. We're agreeing to use the book entry system for logging in the bonds. We will use a bond register and a paying agent to make payments to the bond holders. And there are details about the execution and delivery of the bonds. And the form of the bonds are described in the resolution. Now, this is the important thing. The security of the bonds are primarily the full faith and credit of the township, but the secondary credit is the taxpayers of the county as a whole. There's a section on defeasance or paying off the bond issue early. There are some abilities to do that. We have to establish a principal and interest fund and a construction fund, and those are detailed. I'll have to submit to the Michigan Department of Treasury, and that allows me to do that. And then the sale, delivery and transfer of the bonds are described. And then there is a process for the replacement of bonds. If somebody actually loses that, that's typically something that happened back in the day, but there is a process. And then we agree to do the necessary things to maintain our tax-free status. That's the main thing. These are tax-free, tax-exempt bonds, and that's what gives them an additional favor to the local units. And then, of course, we agree to all the continuing disclosure requirements that are done annually. So that's a really brief overview of this detailed bond resolution. We have Dickinson and Wright as our bond attorneys. And so I'm happy to answer any questions or attempt to answer any questions. And if not, we can follow up with those.
Commissioner Moss.
Sure, pretty simple or straightforward one. How often has the county issued bonds using the same or similar, template?
It really varies depending on the economy. In one year, we had 4 bond issues in front of the county. This year is our first one. And so it has been, I guess the last year has been a little shy of that, but it's cyclical. I do have the Wyoming water transmission main. I've tried to keep that on your radar. That's the next one that's coming before you. And then there are other local units of government that are working on their own projects, trying to figure out their own financing. And there is that possibility that they'll come to us.
And when the county, works with the township or a local unit to issue these bonds, do we use pretty much the same terms that we have here, working through council and then?
Correct. The same financial team is used for this process, as well as if you had a building authority bond or the Water Resources Commissioner bond, the same finance team is involved.
Commissioner Belner.
Just more project specific, with this, probably a majority of this segment being within the city limits of Grand Haven. Is there any kind of existing permitting or, because I know the project's going to be a township owned infrastructure, but it's physically located within the city of Grand Haven right of way. Is there existing permitting that allows that or?
Yes, that's a great question. We started on that about a year ago. And so we have an agreement between the city and the township that deals with all of the things that we are likely to encounter regarding all the other utilities, water services, sewer services, storm sewers. We have the gas company right now that is tearing up the roads, trying to get out of our way. And our goal is that after we get completed with this, the road will be paved curb to curb, and all of the known issues that we need to deal with are dealt with on one manner. So it's taken our industry some time to get everything lined up, but this is an example of I think how we're doing it correctly, and we got in front of it early. And so the city of Grand Haven is going to potentially spend about $500,000 depending on what they encounter with water service replacements and road paving. And so it is a great collaboration between the two communities.
Now, will this water main have service valves, or is it pretty much just a transmission main to get to the metering station?
It's a transmission main. We will have some valves, but they're more expensive, so we have them further apart. And we will have some hydrants available mostly for servicing the main, but those could be available for firefighting in the city.
Okay. I was just going to say future DPW operators will be thankful for those valves, 20 years down the line.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moss.
Just generally speaking, is there a reason, or I guess, do townships often issue their own bonds, or is there a reason they like to work with the county?
The townships can issue their own bonds, but their credit rating typically isn't as strong as the county as a whole. And so that's where, when we work together, we can really take advantage of that and use economy of scale.
Okay. Just wondering if Commissioner Bergman had any thoughts. I know I'm calling on you. They don't mean to, but I'm just, because you were the mayor too.
What I was gonna mention is that we have another bond that should be coming before the board shortly, also from the Lake Board, Spring Lake Board. We'll be looking at a bond, I think, in the $3 million range. I don't know how long it'll be before that comes forward, but within a few months, I'm sure. Because the plan is to do an alum treatment on the lake within the next, I think, a year from now that application will take place. It's about a $3 million project. So that will be another one. And we certainly have had many bonds come before the commission over the years.
We'll keep that on the radar then. Thank you. All right. Seeing any more discussion, we'll go ahead and go to a vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to action item number 13 is the purchase of development rights program, agricultural easements. The suggested motion is to forward to the Board of Commissioners and recommend to the board chair clerk signatures on an agricultural easement purchase agreement with Charles A. Rash and Susan Baumgard Rash for the development rights to 74.32 acres of farmland in Chester Township.
So move.
Support.
Right, any discussion? Would you like to take it
I'm
away?
just
I
here to
don't know.
answer
Yeah, does it
questions
go
if
along
you'd
with
like
that
me
other
to share.
project?
Want me to go ahead and share a little information? Okay.
Please.
Okay, yeah, so very good. So Rash, as those of you that were at Planning and Policy saw, was our top scoring property in 2023. It'll be our first property in our program that we've done that's orchard ground, so we're pretty excited about that. 74 acres. We've done projects in Chester in the past. So the valuation in there is based on that data that we have. This family, both the families that have married together, have been in the business of fruit on the ridge for centuries, since the 1850s. This farm wasn't formed then, but their family's been farming since then. So this will be a great project for us. They have some wildlife habitat at the back of their property, which is a wonderful thing. And we intend to use some regional conservation partnership program funding for this. And we hope to be funded with some Michigan Department of Agriculture, Michigan Ag Preservation Fund dollars as well. We'll apply for those coming up the end of this month should be the deadline. So if all those pieces fall into place, we would hope to close on this property if the purchase agreement is approved, probably in the next 18 months or so. Yeah, I guess one unique thing about this property is that it's in a location that I thought it would be valuable to write a letter of intent to the Fry Foundation, start seeking some other funding sources for some of these projects. We weren't invited to do a full application, but they have farmland protection as a priority. They prioritize regional collaboration with this property being on the ridge. We thought that maybe it would be a good opportunity, but we're continuing to seek additional funding sources for the projects that we do. And this project was kind of my first stab at that. So we'll keep stabbing and see if we can make that happen. So questions on, I would like to point out, this purchase agreement does have language at the bottom about signing authority. So I wanted to make sure that we brought that up and we're open about that. I could answer any questions that you might have about that as well.
Any good? Commissioner Belknap.
I know we did kind of talk a little bit about this at the planning and policy meeting as it relates to scoring and the potential for solar. I do think that, we don't have the final legislation and law yet as it relates to, solar kind of circumventing local ordinance. But I just want to acknowledge that the work of the farmland preservation, this, I'm in favor of this and, we'll be voting for this, but maybe just kind of acknowledgement that, some of what we're hearing is that the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development may be using farmland for solar farms. I don't know that we have the ability to, stop that with these projects. It sounds like once they're in kind of that preserved state, what's coming from, the future legislation on solar may circumvent. But I still think that this is good work and would, want to support that. I think that might be a different fight for a different day. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a couple of things at play in that regard. So, first of all, to my knowledge, that legislation is really going to only apply at this moment to PA 116 or temporary development rights agreements. If it were to apply to any easements that were either donated to the state of Michigan or where the state of Michigan has the right of enforcement, which would be our projects, I don't know that this legislation applies to that. I've not had that conversation with the program manager at the state, and we do have a very good direct relationship on that. And then I've not been made aware of that, but I can look into that and confirm it. And then secondarily, dependent upon the time of the legislation passing, any project we've already done has already got their easement terms in place. It's recorded, it's finalized. This project could potentially still be in play. However, majority of projects that we do, there's been a couple that have been only state funded, but most of them have both state and federal funding paired up. We use them as matching sources, one to the other, because our program is low on funding. So what that does is it forces that project to also be compliant with federal terms. Federal terms do not allow for solar farms on permanent preserved agricultural land. So anything that's preserved with federal dollars is inherently protected from that. You would need the chief of the NRCS to approve that. And you couldn't, because in the rules in 528 subpart whatever, it's not allowed. So of Title 440, I think is what it is. But yes, so anything that's preserved federal funding, it's written into the easement terms and it is prohibited use. So this land to be protected from that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Just, I guess the request would be, when this goes before board, if there's been any change, we can get a briefing.
Legislatively?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I can do a little looking around and I can visit with the program manager. We'll be in communications on some other things as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was remiss earlier when I was speaking about the scoring criteria. You guys all know, but I want to recognize Commissioner Mita. She serves on the Ag Preservation Board, as does Kelly Goward, who was here earlier serving. So I just like to recognize my board members when they're in the room. So
Wonderful.
other questions about Chuck and Sue's property?
No, but I'm looking ahead to number 14 and wondering if you want to stay and we can quick go to it. Oh, sorry. Commissioner Moss, did you have another question?
Sure, on this one?
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, just a couple quick things.
Okay.
Um,
Sorry.
So this one's 74 acres. Could you just speak just kind of for our edification, like the general sizes that the county looks at?
Yes, so we could, by definition and ordinance, look at a property as small as 5 acres. That realistically is never going to score high for a variety of reasons. Functionally, we've done anywhere from just north of 30 acres up to 168 acres. Probably the median or mean is quite a bit lower. That 168, that's an unusual one. The next one we're going to speak to is going to be a pretty big property if we can get that done. But most of them are on that lower side. 123 is another one. We have 155 is another one. So that's kind of the range.
I'd also like to speak to the signing authority change, just a small change. So I'm very comfortable with that. I typically sign all the changes. I have one of them here for you.
Thank you.
And so this would be a change where after the initial signature, the administrator will be able to sign some of the minor adjustments that come through or other minor changes. So I'm comfortable with that.
Great. Thank you. I
Thanks.
appreciate that. It makes a lot of lives a little bit easier, especially with a lot of the changes that happen with both funders. There's just
Mhm.
an unending, flow of documents,
yeah.
administrative documents that need to be signed.
Short
Yes.
time.
And re-signed,
Yeah.
unfortunately, very often.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Nope. Seeing none. All right, can we go to a roll call vote? We'll keep you up here, Kim.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman, Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. Moving on to action item 14, agricultural easements purchase agreement, Molyneux. Suggested motion is to forward to the Board of Commissioners and recommended board chair clerk signatures on an agricultural easement purchase agreement with Wayne Molyneux for development rights to plus or minus 163 acres of farmland in Wright Township. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
On support, it sounds like I had.
Second.
Second. All right, now discussion.
Yes, so briefly about Wayne's property. So as much as the Rash property is specialty crop, it's on the highest point in Ottawa County. It's a lot of unique things about our agricultural heritage up on the ridge. Wayne's property is a roll up your sleeves, corn, soy, hay, wheat, large scale acreage. And we love those properties too. Wayne has applied 2 or 3 years, I think, and actually ranked second this year. So we were able to select him. As I've mentioned before, we don't have a lot of funding, but our board likes to aim for the bleachers. There's a lot of grant funding out there, and all that takes is a little bit of time to assemble these grant applications and get them in. So we would like to move forward with a purchase agreement for Wayne's property. One difference that you'll see on Wayne's purchase agreement that you won't see on the Rashes is that there is no contribution from our private non-endowed fund. We are continuing to build that fund. If funds become available, we will apply some to Wayne's property. But at this point, we're going to be very reliant upon getting both state and federal funds to close on his property. And we do keep those property owners aware of that as we go forward, that, it is very dependent on getting the grant funding in order to do this project. More about Wayne's. It's 2 separate parcels. They have one Langland parcel in between. So they're not adjacent. They're not adjacent parcels. But very similar soil profiles, similar production, same management. Any other questions I might be able to answer on this project for you?
Further discussion? It's like, no. Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time today and your expertise.
Thank you.
All right. Could we go to a vote for the agricultural easement agreement for Molyneux property?
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. Action item 15 is the renewal of the county scene platform. Suggested motion is request for the board to approval for the renewal of our security incident and emergency management SEAM platform. Lemuria for 3-year contract with annual payments of $101,208. This request is pivotal to maintaining and enhancing security of our organization's digital infrastructure.
So moved.
Second.
All right, discussion, Paul?
Morning.
Good morning.
As you just mentioned, this is a renewal of a piece of software that we've had and used for the last 3 years. You might ask what a security event and information and event management system does. So, for example, if you normally work in this facility and we find that you've logged in Indonesia, it might send a flag and warn us and or freeze your account, which is why if you're traveling abroad, you might want to let us know ahead of time. Or if you're logged in 2 separate locations, something's awry. So it lets us know these things. This is something that is required at this point. Yeah, I guess if we have any other questions.
Do you track number of incidents?
We can track just about anything.
Just curious. I mean,
Yeah.
do you know like how many attempts we've had?
Yep. But that we have other systems that will lock you after so many attempts.
Okay.
That would be our ICE environment.
No, I just
Intrusion
wondered, I know I
security
didn't ask you ahead of time. Do you have a number, approximate number?
Of what, when you get locked out?
Or no, just how many attempts we've had on our security or
Oh, geez, I don't know. Mike?
a lot?
327 in the last how many?
No.
Last how long? The last 90 days.
Wow. Yes. We will definitely be voting for this.
It's-
renewal.
His phone goes off when these things go on.
All right. Are there any other questions? No. All right. Seeing none. Very vital service. Thank you.
Great
Piece of
question,
software.
Gretchen.
All right. So the vote is for the renewal of the county SEAM platform.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel. Yes. Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. All right, action item 16 is Board of Commissioners roll call software contract. The suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the contract with Grancius LLC for the purchase of the electronic roll call software and agenda management systems. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion?
And it seems like
Pretty
we,
straightforward. Go ahead.
yeah, it seems like we had this
Commissioner.
conversation on this as part of the capital
It feels like,
budget.
yeah, something that we had before. So, all right, we'll go ahead and go to a roll call vote.
Mrs. Ebel. Yes. Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to action item 17, just 2 more to go after this one. Boardroom AV audio video enhancement revision 2. Suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the contract with Blue Water for the enhancements of the boardroom audio video. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
And then discussion, Paul?
This request leverages existing CIP funds. First off, it refreshes all the equipment that's sitting here under the DS that was last installed in 2014. It is beyond end of life and it is no longer supported. We will be relocating all that equipment to the communications closet behind the room. So it'll be on generator and UPS as well. What else did I have written down here? Oh, 3 cameras. We're going to be putting in 3 automated cameras. So the system will know who's speaking into what microphone and will reposition that view. So Jordan here doesn't have to do that.
And didn't you share that this is like at end of life too?
Yeah, well, like I said,
Correctly.
it was in last refreshed in 2014. So
The
we're
equipment.
we've got a 12+ month supply chain issue on any of this equipment. So we won't be seeing some of that equipment here for at least a year.
Good information to know. Commissioner Zalstra.
It's a good question, Paul. Where are the cameras be located at, or what views will they have?
The initial design was to have one straight ahead and two on each side.
Okay. So replacing that one, adding and adding, right?
And we're going to reposition this one into the main conference room where the camera's broken.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Paul. All right, so the motion is to approve the board AV enhancements for Vision 2. And go to a vote.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Moving on to action item 18, it's a fiscal year 2024 budget adjustments. Suggested motion to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the 2024 budget adjustments per the attached schedule. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, the last action item is the approval of the minutes from the September 5th, 2023 planning, not planning and policy. I apologize. Let's see, the approval of the minutes for the October 5th, 2023 Finance and Administrative Committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
And Allison, you had some discussion?
Yes, just in keeping with typical records of meeting minutes, I would make a motion to strike the extra words from the September finance meeting from FC 23-143, beginning with per commissioner and ending with the word begin.
Support.
Do we have any further discussion? And what's this? It's just more of a correction in what capacity?
keeping with-
Sorry, just
Yeah,
keeping-
keeping with
Pages.
same protocol of what we've done in the past. And so we had that discussion at a different meeting that we did something similar. And so it was also supported by our clerk's department of the request of not of my motion of striking those extra words.
Oh, just additional words.
Yep. So on page, Commissioner Zylstra was asking for a page. I was trying to look for it a minute. It was on page 8 of our packet. So if you see under FC 23-143, the motion said move to eliminate 80,000 from salaries. We're not getting rid of that. It's just the extra commentary underneath the yays.
Maybe I have an old packet. Is that possible?
I don't think so.
I have it.
Mine starts with 146. You're saying 143?
Give me 1 second to read
Sure,
down the packet. 'Cause I apparently have an old packet.
Okay.
Oh,
And it's a September 19 minutes,
I
not
did-
the October
September
5.
You might
Oh,
have a
sorry.
different one because I noticed an error that we didn't have this in the agenda previously. And so then I brought it up to the attention of Administrator Gibson Jordan, and I asked that this would get added to the agenda.
Give me 1 second.
So we had 2 sets of minutes included in the packet. One was for September 19 and one was for October 5.
Okay.
And she's talking about the October 5 minutes.
The-
Oh, sorry, the September
Right,
19
okay.
minutes. Yes.
Now I got the new packet. No, apologies. The page.
Page 8 of our packet.
It's the
But
very,
it's, and it's
very
under
bottom.
FC 23-143.
4-3. And you're saying that these minutes, I'm sorry, they were
All
not
I'm
approved
asking-
before, they were approved before, apology.
No, these were never approved. We had tabled this to this month so that we could get advice on whether or not we should have put this extra statement in our meeting minutes.
Okay,
And so I'm making the motion to strike those extra comments.
okay.
So which are the extra comments?
It starts with per Commissioner
Per
Miedema.
commission,
Yep,
okay,
and then it ends with Ottawa County can begin.
okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Go to a vote. You want roll call, please?
Okay. Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mrs. Miedema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. And moving on to committee reports. We have Treasurer Amanda Price here to do the Treasurer's Financial Month End Updates.
Good morning.
Morning.
It's still
Yeah,
morning.
Still morning, yeah.
Apologize, I was not here last month. I was attending the funeral of two really awesome women from Ottawa County who passed away. And so it was a hard day, but I'm back now. So we're covering both August and September. Not too much to share with you. I do have my one pager to hand out to you, but the economy's still pretty much on track. Bond rates are really in a great position for my investment purposes right now. I did want to share with you, I believe in September, you received Form 5840, which reported on the foreclosures for 2021. It's a form that goes to the state so that they're tracking how much excess proceeds we have in our foreclosure. So this covered 2021 foreclosures. Just to give you an idea of 2023 foreclosures, we had 12 properties this year that we foreclosed on. 11 of them sold in foreclosure sales. One remains. It is a gap parcel in Blendon Township that will likely be purchased by an adjoining property owner. It's a very strange 4-foot by 14 4-foot little pie chart shaped piece of land. So just is a gap parcel that sometimes happens when you revise your property lines. So any questions for me? Yes, Rebecca.
Actually, I just have a statement. I just wanted to say thank you for your service to the county, and we're going to miss you greatly upon your retirement at the end of the year. So I just wanted to commend you and your team for all the work and effort you've put in here in Ottawa County. So thank you, Amanda.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We still get to see you in December though, don't we?
No, we
Yes.
will.
Yeah.
She just announced it, so I
Oh,
thought.
no, I just want to make sure, yeah, we acknowledge it properly in December as well.
We will.
So.
Yeah, and I don't think Becky's still here, but Becky gave you the update on the land bank. Everything we're doing with blight elimination now. The land bank in Ottawa County, just to give you an idea, is very seldom used. We have one property in the land bank. It is a side yard of one gentleman's property in Holland Township. And so and that's an intentional thing by the board. Previous boards, we didn't want to utilize the land bank too much. We wanted the private sector to act more frequently. So this opportunity to do some blight elimination in the county has been really unusual for us to get that amount of money into the land bank. But we would not be able to do that without Becky Huttinga, because she is a marvel at what she does. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. No, she is exceptional. Thank you. All right. So with that, we have our second opportunity for public comment. We have 3 minutes. We can approach the podium and please speak to the chair. Announce your name and where you vote. Do you have any public comments? All right.